So that's true or false. Rich will have another set of questions for me after the game, after Oklahoma's 1,000-3 defeat of Western Carolina when we do our podcast on Sunday. Rich, let's move into some Big 12 talk as the conference really gets set to have another, in my opinion, decent weekend. Week 1, the Big 12 went 9-1. I think that will be difficult to duplicate. But I do think the Big 12 is going to be above 500 this coming weekend. Now, you brought up a point that you want to do something a little bit different when we go through the Big 12 rundown. So you want us to give a descriptive phrase for each team. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So tell me, let's start with Kansas. I'm gonna let you go first. I'm gonna let you set the standard here. Kansas gets things started again for the Big 12 on Friday night. They go to Conway, South Carolina to play Coastal Carolina. This is the third year in a row that they've played Coastal Carolina, number 17 in the country. They're 0-2 against Coastal Carolina in Lawrence. They go to, like I said, Conway to play this team. They're a 26-point underdog, 26.5. Tell me about Kansas.
Matt, I was going to, with the idea, let me explain it. Okay, so I was going to use 3 words to describe each of the programs, and those 3 words didn't necessarily pertain to this season, but definitely pertain to the program and were centered around football. Okay. So when we talk about Kansas and summing them up in 3 words, it's really easy for me. A basketball school.
Okay.
It's the truth, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, that's true because I mean and Bill Self looks untouchable, by the way. So no, I'll take that. I'm going to say Kansas is in trouble. That's only 2 words. Kansas. Can I take out the word is? Kansas in trouble.
There you go.
And so because they kind of pounded their chest, they stormed the field, getting that week 1 win, but they're going into the hornet's nest this week. Coastal Carolina has beaten them 2 years in a row, and Coastal Carolina this is an easy cover for me in my opinion. 26.5. If I was laying some dimes down this weekend on college sports, this would be one of the places I would do that. I would take both Coastal Carolina 26.5, and the over under is 52. So that's where I would go on the over there as well. Saturday morning, Oklahoma State kicks off the Big 12 slate by hosting the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. A lot of people put a stock into Tulsa losing their week 1 opener, and I don't think there's been enough conversation about Oklahoma State struggling heavily against Missouri State. Now, Oklahoma State's going to say, well, we didn't have Spencer Sanders. Well, Spencer Sanders isn't going to fix that running attack, how inept their both running backs were for Oklahoma State. The Cowboys averaging less than 2 yards per carry. Tulsa also missing players in week 1 due to suspension that stems back from an incident in their bowl season. So my 3 words for Oklahoma State, Rich, are this. I don't know. How's that? I don't know if this is Mike Gundy's last year. I don't know if Shane Illingworth is the better of the 2 quarterbacks between him and Spencer Sanders. I don't know if they can beat Tulsa. They're 13-point favorites. I do know this. I would take Tulsa in those 13 points in this game. And what it comes down to for me is here's what I know. I know this is the 3rd year Spencer Sanders has been the quarterback for this football team, and it's the 3rd year that he's not been able to play the entire season due to something. It was COVID protocol last week. The years before, it's been injury. But, yeah, here's what I know. I'm taking Tulsa plus 13, and I'm saying I don't know what Oklahoma State's going to be like this year.
I'm definitely in the same boat of saying I don't know as the 3 words, but if I had to pick something that was just a little bit different than what you're saying, it would really center around the quarterback situation for a lot of the reasons that you've already mentioned. And those 3 words would be pick a quarterback. When it's come to Mike Gundy, when it's come to here in these past couple of seasons, I don't really think he's been 100% sold on a quarterback, and he hasn't bought in. While Spencer Sanders is extremely talented, is a guy who is far more athletic than Shane Illingworth. Illingworth seems to be the better thrower or the more consistent thrower of the two. He just doesn't present that X factor that Spencer Sanders does. And so it's easy to find yourself getting caught between those two. I think this will be a really good matchup on Saturday. It's probably the second highest rated game for me. If I were to rank the games from start to finish, it would be the second most interesting game of the Big 12 this week.
That's a good point. For me, it's third most, and I'll tell you when we get to it, number 2 and number 1. But that is a good point, and because I do think this will be a close game. But as far as ranking the games of the Big 12, that's a great topic, and I would put it at 3. I'm curious. You said it's 2, so when we get to, I think I know who your number 1 is going to be. It's probably going to equal my number 1. Let's move on to the afternoon games. Cal at TCU. Horned Frogs with a blowout win. A blowout win in week 1 over Duquesne. Now they get to host Cal, who lost to Nevada. TCU 11.5-point favorites. Over under on this is 48. Give me your description of TCU.
Yeah, when I'm looking at TCU and I'm looking at what they're doing, I'm looking at it from a conference standpoint, Matt. So the 3 words I use are the comeback kid. Okay. TCU did not have the greatest of outings last year, and I know that a lot of that centered around the health at the quarterback position, not being able to figure some things out, running back as well. Needless to say, they started to shore up some of those things towards the end of the season, and we know that Gary Patterson is one of the defensive gurus, one of the premier defensive-minded individuals here in the Big 12, if not in the country. And so what we look at is this idea that now they've got this quarterback situation that's kind of starting to roll for them. They've started to figure things out at the running back position, and I legitimately think that TCU can play the role of a spoiler. I'm not saying that they're going to win the conference, but I think that they can string together a few wins that will definitely muddy up the waters of who's at the top and who's in the middle of this conference, who's an actual challenger and who's a pretender in this conference. Because again, they are going to get some wins that people just don't expect them to claim.
No, that's TCU. My 3 words are better than expected. And I know it was Duquesne. I know it's a game that they should have rolled, and they did. They only gave up 3 points on the defensive side of the ball, scored 45 points altogether. They're better than expected. I think they get to prove that this week against a Cal team that kind of limps in to Fort Worth, Texas. I think if my prediction here, I would take TCU and the 11.5 points. I think I would take the over-unders were spot on at 48. I think I would just, if I had to pick on the over-under, I would pick the over. But this is a team that I had put them in the middle of the pack in the Big 12. I still think they're in the middle of the pack of the Big 12, but they're better than I expected them to be after week 1, with the understanding that it was only Duquesne that they were playing. Let's go to the afternoon, continuing the afternoon. Iowa State. This is, in my opinion, Rich, you can back me up or you can disagree. This is the big game in the Big 12 this week. Top 10 matchup. Number 10, Iowa at number 9, Iowa State. Iowa very much looked the part of a top 10 team last week in their opener against Indiana. Iowa State very much did not look the part of a top 10 team against, was it Northern Iowa or Iowa Wesleyan or whoever they played. The point of the matter is here, Iowa State, here's my 3 words, better be prepared. Because Iowa's coming. This is a rivalry game. It's an early season rivalry game, and they better be prepared because the Hawkeyes are coming to Ames after not getting to play this game last year, and they're coming to play. And there's no time for Iowa State just to kind of make mistakes. And Brock Purdy's not going to throw the ball away the way the Indiana quarterback did against the Cyclones. I know Charlie Kohler didn't play last week for Iowa State. He's expected to play this week, but the running game has to be better. Everything has to be better for Iowa State, or they're sitting at 1-1 at the end of the day.
Yeah, when it comes to Iowa State, for me, the 3 words are still a contender. Iowa State did not put their best foot forward, and a lot of people want to count them out because of the win that they claimed in week 1 and the fact that it was not a quality opponent. I look at Iowa State and I still see Number one, they have the three-headed monster that exists on the offensive side of the ball, but they're playing defensively sound. I honestly think week one for them was their trap game. It was the game that they were looking ahead to. It was the game that's a rivalry, and it's right up front in the non-conference portion of the schedule. But not only that, it's going to be between two ranked opponents. It's an opportunity for Iowa State, not just to say we're a contender in the Big 12, but also to say we're a contender on the national level. And we came this year to spoil the Oklahoma Sooners bid for another consecutive Big 12 championship. If Iowa State plays like we think they can, Matt, they are going to be a handful, and that's for any team that they come up against this year.
Yeah, so Iowa State 4.5 point favorites, over unders 46, 16 points at home in your season opener. Don't give me a lot of confidence in the Cyclones in this 4.5 point favorite. I think this is a game that comes down to a field goal, honestly, Rich. And so when I think about a field goal game, I don't want to say the team's going to cover more than 3 points. And so if I'm picking this game right now, number one, I'm taking the under on that 46 points, and then I'm going to say that it's a field goal game. So that means I'm taking Iowa in 4.5 points and saying Iowa State will not cover 4.5. What do you think on that?
It is two quality opponents, and if these two teams play to the caliber that they're capable of, I'm going to agree with you that this is going to be under that 3.5 point spread at the moment. One team clearly is going to win, but I think it's going to be by 1 to 3 points.
Okay, Long Island University at West Virginia, no point spreads, no over unders. West Virginia they got to win. So give me your description here.
Yeah, the description I'm going with, Matt, with West Virginia is curb your enthusiasm.
Oh, wow.
When we look at West Virginia, I see that they suffered a loss to Maryland in week one. It wasn't something that was unpredictable. You could see that one producing a loss for West Virginia, and that's exactly what happened. But when we look at the offensive line and a lot of the struggles that West Virginia had there, when we look at the fact that there was only one individual who carried the ball, and that was Letty Brown out of the backfield, ran for 69 yards. You look at the 4 turnovers and not showcasing the ability to gain any turnovers. It was a -4 turnover margin for West Virginia on Saturday. Things are going to be rough. And while we look at West Virginia and we say that this should be a win for them and it should be a big win, I think when they step back up into Power 5 play, that they're once again going to have these expectations that are lofty. And a lot of it, I think, is due to the unorthodox defense that West Virginia has traditionally played. But needless to say, it's time to begin to curb our enthusiasm with West Virginia, because they're not as good as I thought they were going to be.
I didn't have high expectations for West Virginia, but my 3 words are need to win. And because I didn't have high expectations of West Virginia, this is a game, like you said, you lose to Maryland in week 1, you got to win. They're buying a win. They're doing exactly what Oklahoma's doing with Western Carolina, and you got to take advantage of that. So you need to win this game. I think they do win this game, but that's a very good. Curb your enthusiasm is a good phrase. I think that's definitely worth keeping there. Same time as Oklahoma and Western Carolina is my number 2 game of the week in the Big 12, which is Texas, number 15, Texas at Arkansas. Longhorns 7-point favorites, over under 56.5. And my 3 words description here for Texas is better watch out, because this is an old Southwest Conference rivalry. Arkansas won 38-17 last week to start their season. Texas is the better team coming in my opinion. But I think Texas is in for a dogfight. And if I'm picking spreads here, which clearly I'm doing that here, I'm taking Arkansas getting 7 points, and I'm definitely taking the over at 56.5, because I think there's questions. Both of these defenses, I think Texas is going to rely heavily on Bijan Robinson, and I think Arkansas is going to try to shut that down and make Hudson Card see what he can do. He is 14-21 last week, 224 yards. But I think this is going to be a battle. I think it's going to be a fun game, and Texas better watch out.
For Texas, Matt, my 3 words, I'm saying this jokingly, but I know that there is just, it appears to be a hint of truth to it, and it's Texas is back. When we look at Texas, they did get a win over a ranked opponent in week 1. I know that those expectations and what this team is capable of from the fans' perspective is beginning to soar and reach unrivaled levels as what we saw during the Sam Ehlinger years. And I knew that that was an experienced quarterback. I knew that that was a quarterback with a level of tenacity not seen often from that position, but it was also it was a guy who could lead Texas to a few wins that they may not have picked up without him on the field. Now it's a completely new coaching staff. The starting quarterback is being broken in, and you're right. Robinson is the feature of this offense. And when we look at what they're going to do, I'm not saying that Arkansas is going to shut them down, but Arkansas is going to want to throw the ball and Texas is going to want to run it.
Right.
And I think that's going to put pressure on Texas to begin to throw the ball, because it's really the offense versus the offense for me. And we were looking at Arkansas and saying that they had possibly the best wide receiver group heading into 2021. Granted, they lose Mike Woods as he transfers to the University of Oklahoma, but needless to say, it's still a very talented group with a lot of potential once you can get the ball to them. So Texas, this secondary is going to be tested. They're going to try to slow the game down by running the ball. I don't know which direction this one swings in, but I'm going to give it to Texas for now, because Oklahoma, I know that we don't like to admit it, but when Texas comes into the Red River rivalry as a ranked team, all eyeballs are on. The level of competition is ratcheted up, and it seems to be this turning point for Oklahoma. At least it was for Spencer Rattler last year. So once again, I'm hoping that that holds true. Texas gets the win, and quote unquote, Texas is back.
So the final three games, we're going to give obviously our score predictions for Oklahoma and Western Carolina to close out the podcast. But the final three games on the Big 12 slate, all dogs. Texas Southern is at Baylor. Southern Illinois is at Kansas State. Stephen F. Austin is at Texas Tech. All three of those games should be wins for the Big 12 as the Big 12 officially goes into what I call cupcake weekend across the conference. So we're going to say wins for Baylor, wins for Kansas State, wins for Texas Tech. So we're just going to give our descriptive words for Baylor, and you, I think it's your turn to go first.
I don't know anymore. Baylor is the one that was difficult for me coming up with some kind of a phrase for them. In fact, I haven't settled on anything, if I'm being completely open and honest. But I want to say this about Baylor in 3 words, is that back to normal. Baylor, for the longest time, was one of the cellar dwellers here in the Big 12. I know that a lot has changed there. I know that the Art Briles era is long gone, and Baylor's attempting to move forward. Matt Rule did an excellent job. Once again, he's long gone. And so I think it's just back to routine for Baylor. We're going to see them at the bottom of the heap for some years to come.
Yeah, we're very close on this because mine is still the same, meaning I went back and looked at some film from this game last week with Baylor's season opener, and we kind of predicted that to be a struggle for the Bears, and it was. I think this is a little bit easier of a win for them, but this is still the same Baylor team. They have a lot of struggles, and I haven't seen anything change with them. Now, Kansas State, scared to death. Those are my 3 words, Rich, because they went out and just took Stanford behind the woodshed down in Dallas, Texas. And Oklahoma's got to go to Manhattan. And I've been saying for a long time, you got Skylar Thompson, you got Deuce Vaughn. This team scares me. And after seeing what they did to Stanford, now I know Oklahoma's on a different level than Stanford, but Kansas State's going to be a player in the Big 12, Rich. I'm convinced of it, and they scare me to death.
Yeah, I'm absolutely on board with that. I was with Kansas State. My 3 words were dark horse candidate, even though I think dark horse is one word. Don't at me, as people were saying at one point in time. But when you look at Kansas State, they have all the makings of a team that's capable of running some teams off the field offensively. And again, it's because of the dual threat nature at the quarterback position and what you've mentioned in Skylar Thompson. When he's hitting receivers on a consistent basis, it's an extremely dangerous team. We know that they always play blue collar style of football with a chip on their shoulder. So they're going to set the tone in terms of physicality. And if you can't match them on the field, they will run all over you with Deuce Vaughn. Needless to say, this is a team that's capable, like I said, with TCU, it's capable of beating some of the top programs on any given day. Will it shake out that way? It's yet to be seen, but they're a very dangerous team, and they're a team to keep your eye on for sure.
All right, Texas Tech, give it to me.
Texas Tech for me is largely because of the coaching situation, but it's in the hot seat. When we look at Texas Tech, I think you could also apply needs to win, because this is a team that has been struggling, and I think they know the dangers of facing an FCS opponent. Stephen F. Austin, I think, is going to give the Red Raiders all that they can handle. And when we look, what was it? I'm not even going to comment on that, so never mind. But when we look at the Red Raiders and we look at Stephen F. Austin, if Stephen F. Austin beats them, I think Matt Wells is basically done. I don't know that they get rid of him middle of the season, but I do think they get rid of him at the end of the season. This is one of those games that Texas Tech has to win. They have to prove that they are capable of competing and not just necessarily competing with FCS opponents. So the verdict is still out on what's going to happen with Matt Wells, but we know he's in the hot seat. And so when I look at them as a program, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
See, I'm opposite of you here, Rich. I have sigh of relief because I think Matt Wells is on the hot seat. But after they win last week against Houston, that they're down 14-0, you come back and you just throttle the Cougars in Houston. I think Matt Wells is breathing a sigh of relief because he's got Stephen F. Austin coming in, and I think the Red Raiders win this game by multiple touchdowns. And so it really kind of allows him, for the very first time in his tenure, to build some early momentum. And so sigh of relief is what I've got here for Texas Tech and Matt Wells. We're on the opposite end of the spectrum there. All right, here we go. Oklahoma, 6 o'clock kickoff. It is pay-per-view. Western Carolina, the Sooners, number 4 in the nation. No point spreads, no over-unders, just straight up. Oklahoma's going to win this game. The question is, by how much? Here's my description of the Sooners, Richard. Still the king. Still the king. This is still the best team in the Big 12. I understand that they got off to a rough start, but who didn't? The challenger has not yet emerged. It could be Texas. It could be Kansas State. It could be Iowa State. We don't know yet, but what we do know is that Oklahoma is still the king. I've got the Sooners rolling big, 54-14 in a final here, and just your average, everyday 40-point blowout win.
Yeah, I was going to go with a very similar and borrow a song title from Queen and saying "We're the Champions." And the reason being is when we look at Oklahoma, it's not like they haven't been in this position before. They've had some bumpy or rocky starts to the season in the past. In fact, if you want to go and look at some of the national championship runs that Oklahoma has had, there were these hurdles that Oklahoma barely cleared en route to those national championships, to those national titles, to hoisting the trophy. Again, this is nothing new for this program. In fact, we can look at just last year and say the exact same thing. When Oklahoma dropped 2 games, not just won them by a hair, but dropped 2 games and still came out in the end as the Big 12 champion. So my faith in this program, my faith in this coaching staff is unwavering at this point. Despite new faces being on the field, Oklahoma will reign supreme until someone can knock them down a notch. And simply put, it doesn't happen this week.
All right, give me a score prediction for Saturday.
My score prediction, Matt, I've been saying all along, I think this is going to be close, right around a 50-point win. So if Oklahoma scores 49 points more than WCU does, I would be happy with that. And I'm actually going to go with a score of 10 for WCU to Oklahoma's 56.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us at the Sooner Nation podcast. You can find us every day, heartland-sports.com, pregame, postgame. During the game, we're on Twitter, at Sports Heartland on Twitter. Please subscribe to the Sooner Nation podcast anywhere podcasts are found. We will be there. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your football. We'll be back Sunday night to recap Oklahoma, Western Carolina. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Boomer Sooner.